This is the award-winning Wycombe Sound.
17 minutes past 12 o'clock mid-mornings on Wycombe Sound. Welcome to Thursday. It's been kind to you so far. Cheer up, soon be Friday. Now then, here is Matthew Watts. Matthew is going to get on his bike in the not too distant future and ride it to Ypres, to the Menin Gate, which, if my memory serves me correctly, is the one where they play the last post every night. It's such an evocative place. We'll ask him why he's doing it in a moment. But also, can I introduce you to Penny Dyson, who is a representative of Royal British Legion Industries. Not the British Legion itself, British Legion Industries. So let's start with, shall we, what actually is the difference between the Royal British Legion and British Legion Industries, Penny?
Right, hi Jonathan, hi Matthew. RBLI, as we call it, was formed in 1919, 2 years before the Legion came along in 1921. And although our roots are intertwined, we are a totally separate charity. We were formed to look after soldiers returning from the trenches of the First World War. A lot of them had TB, and so we looked after them in a nursing home. A few years down the line, we got into financial difficulties, or rather our forebears did, and the Legion helped us out and took over the running of the nursing side of the operation. And that's when we started to be sort of a sister charity to them. So we share the poppy as an emblem, but we don't benefit at all from poppy appeal. We are a social enterprise charity because we provide employment for veterans as well as housing and back-to-work care. We have the same aims as the Legion, but we are a totally separate charity.
Okay then. So you are the beneficiaries, are you, of fundraising things like Matthew is about to do?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we get our money from fundraising, a mix of fundraising, and from our social enterprise factory.
A social enterprise factory?
Yeah.
We might come back to that in a moment or two as well. Let's bring in Matthew. You're going to ride your bike to the Menin Gate, yeah?
That's absolutely right, yeah.
Is it just to raise money, or is there more purpose to it than that?
There's a bit of background. Unfortunately, I suffered from an illness last year, which caused me to lose my job. And I've been working in third sector finance, very long hours, not been looking after myself. And so the first thing to do was get fit, and it was suggested I dig out an old mountain bike that was lurking in my parents' garage. So I started puffing and panting for a couple of miles at a time around the local village. And then suddenly thought, I can do a bit more of this. And actually, strange enough, it was a very sick veteran who had a lovely road bike that he'd virtually never ridden and gave this to me. So I started extending my horizons, going a little bit further, and then thought, can I do this for some sort of charity? And I looked at the various big name events that happened, but the RBLI Ypres Challenge came up, and that really caught my imagination. As I say, I'm an ex-forces officer myself. And I've been lucky enough to have a lot of support from friends and family and so on during the period of my illness, and now I'm trying to get back into work. But some people don't have that, and RBLI is there to provide, as I understand, complete care for people, to get them back into work, to give them accommodation and so on. And it just really chimed with something I believe in doing and think needs to be done.
So in a phrase, you could call it giving something back.
That's right, yes.
Penny, how valuable is that to organisations like RBLI?
It's fantastic because on the ride we're doing this year, we've got 10 other veterans, including Matthew, and having them alongside our supporters and people that support our charity, they can see the benefit of what we do. And it's inspiring to see some of our veterans. Some of them have got severe disabilities. We've got a couple of Gurkhas who've only got one leg. We've got people with PTSD. We've got a blind, partially sighted veteran and a deaf veteran. And so for able-bodied people to ride alongside our veterans, it's totally inspiring and helps us to raise the profile of the charity and of what we do.
Plus also, presumably from a personal point of view of somebody like Matthew, you get to meet people in the similar sort of situation and make a connection with people who you otherwise wouldn't meet, maybe.
Well, I've only just got to know Matthew through this ride, and his story fits perfectly with what we are trying to do. And we've already put Matthew in touch with another rider who's away from our core, which is Kent, And I think, Matthew, you've been in touch with Jason, haven't you?
Yes, that's right. We're sort of sharing training tips and hints and things we're doing, just keeping each other's morale up and our enthusiasm going. But what's completely inspiring is while I'm pedalling by legs, Jason is riding his on a hand cycle.
Oh, all that way?
All that way.
All that way, yeah.
Presumably there is a definite physical reason why he's doing that. He's not just doing that because somebody suggested it.
Well, I think, Jason, what we find, and Matthew's put it very well, really, what we find with a lot of our veterans is that they use physical fitness to help to overcome the other challenges that they're facing. And sort of doing the ride is one of them. Jason, I think, is quite an athlete. I think he's done quite a bit of stuff in the past. And we're delighted that, he's joining us on the ride this year.
Goodness. The British Legion, as you said, Penny, started just after the First World War, presumably with a definite clientele. Is that quite the word? I'm not sure. But the people that they dealt with were the casualties from the First World War,
Yes.
of whom there are now none left. So presumably your job is developing all the time.
The job of charities like ours will go on really forever, because when we say veterans, I know people tend to think of our old soldiers, but in fact, the veterans that we are taking on the cycle ride, the eldest one is in his 50s, who was injured on the Sir Galahad in the Falklands War, and the youngest are Afghanistan veterans, so only in their late 20s. And the need for assistance for them will go on for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, not just the assistance that you give them, but the assistance they give each other.
Absolutely. And we find that the camaraderie of working together and doing these events together is huge benefit to everybody.
So that being the case then, going to the Menin Gate, did I remember that correctly, that this is the memorial where they sound the last post every night?
The town of Ypres, which was, there was major battles in the First World War, and it was razed to the ground. And in thanks that they have the last post ceremony every evening at 8 o'clock, and they would do it whether there was anybody there or not. In fact, these days huge crowds go, but I think it was only a short period of time when they didn't do it, and that was during the occupation in the Second World War. But other than that, they perform that ceremony every evening at 8 o'clock.
So for somebody with their own history, that must be even more evocative than for somebody who just knows the story.
It's hugely moving. We did this ride last year, a much smaller one, and we took some veterans, and 3 of them laid a wreath at the Menin Gate. And the other cyclists who have nothing to do with our charity except to support us were really in tears when they sort of, marched across the Menin Road up the steps to lay the wreath, because their injuries from things from behind was very obvious, and these guys had cycled 150 miles and laid wreaths to honour, the fallen. On the Menin Gate, the names on the Menin Gate are for people that have no known grave. Thousands of them. So it's very moving.
Yes, that's what I found absolutely staggering. When I was serving the Territorial Army, I took a party of my soldiers, including some young soldiers who'd never even left the country, to go and visit the First World War battlefields. And we went to the Menin Gate, and it's something like 90,000 names on it of people with no known grave. And it is a very, very sobering place to go.
It is, indeed.
Yeah, is there, I wonder, a bit of a dual purpose for the British Legion generally, to look after people, but also to keep it in people's minds, to in the end, try and make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the British Legion, which isn't us, I need to keep pointing out,
yes,
the Royal British Legion, they are custodians of remembrance. That is their main role. They are there to make sure that we, as a nation, never forget what has happened. But I think every time that we are visible, even in our charity, with our veterans, it reminds people that, service and sacrifice goes on forever. Whether there's a conflict in the news or not, service and sacrifice goes on forever.
Matthew, what are you hoping to come out of this experience with? What difference are you thinking it'll make?
Well, I think there are three things. I mean, first of all, I aim to raise some money, which would be nice. Secondly, to raise the awareness of RBLI as a separate charity and entity. And thirdly, just to test myself and, as I say, to give a little back. I've been doing a lot of training. I've been very grateful to an old school friend who coaches cycling, who his contribution to this expedition has been coaching me. And he's been taking me further and further. I cycled the other day 60 miles just for a cup of coffee in training for this event.
I hope it was a good coffee.
It was, and then the Rocky Road cake was to be recommended as well. But I think what is going on today is, and this may sound slightly distasteful, but the way that battlefield casualties are dealt with these days is so much more efficient. The people who perhaps would have died in the past are now surviving. And therefore, there are a lot of young soldiers out, or soldiers, sailors and airmen and women out there who've suffered horribly, but who are alive and need to be looked after. I mean, I was very lucky. I joined up just after the first Gulf War in 1990 and left just before the activities in Afghanistan. I did serve in Bosnia. So I haven't seen a lot of the really horrible side close up. But yes, there are people out there who really, really need the help. And I think what RBLI does is absolutely fantastic, and especially people with PTSD and problems who haven't got anywhere else to turn, and they can find a home, they can find care, and they can move into employment and get better. And as someone who's suffered an illness myself and lost work over it, that's just a wonderful thing.
So, for the listener who is inspired and now wants to encourage you, how do they do it?
Well, I have a page on Just Giving. If you search for Matthew Watts, that's Matthew with two T's and Matthew with two T's, Watts with two T's. It's on there. Alternatively, just look for Royal British Legion Industries and try and make a donation that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be to my account. Otherwise, anyone who happens to be on the route between Aylesford and Kent and Ypres, give a wave to the peloton of people in Jersey with poppies on.
Yeah, when actually are you doing it?
We're off on the 11th of July.
Okay, sometime in the day or two after the 11th of July, then if you happen to be in Kent, watch for the guys on the cycles.
It's Friday the 12th, Matthew.
Oh, sorry, yes, I was thinking we were getting down to get together and prepare and get the bikes put together on the 11th. So
I know you're coming down a day earlier, aren't you? That's probably why you're thinking of the 11th.
Indeed.
I'm glad you corrected him, Penny, because otherwise he could have found himself 24 hours ahead of everybody else.
Or I might have been cycling from Wycombe to Aylesford.
Now that would be dedicated to cycle to the start of a marathon cycle. No. Penny, thank you for your time this morning, this afternoon. And let's hope that people are inspired by the stories and the reasons for doing it. Because, as we were saying, the First World War may be history, but it's very close history, isn't it? Close in more ways than one.
It is. And it's very close to us in Kent, of course, who sort of, are just miles away from where the action took place. But it's where our first beneficiaries came from the charity from the battlefields of the First World War. So it's very important to us.
And as you said, the work will probably never end, which in one way is sad, but in the other way it's nice to know that British Legion and Royal British Legion Industries are there. Penny and Matthew, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thanks.
Love music, love talk, love Wycombe Sound.